I don't know if you're on the same side of TikTok as I am, but my whole For You page is just flooded with female solo travel, how to be a digital nomad, or where to go this year, all of that and more. Um, that probably is a personal thing, but nonetheless, this is a huge movement that's happening right now. I mean, as we know, there is so much remote work happening. And as things get back to normal per se, we're going back to office, but I think a lot of us have really realized the perk of remote work and how you can really make it, fit to your lifestyle and the benefits that are there. And don't get me wrong, I actually love to be in person with people when I'm working on a project and collaborating. I actually think that goes really freaking far. So I'm not an anti office person, honestly, but I think that depending on what you do, and I think having the option, whether it be you're in the office at some point or there's something really going on in New York that month, like go get out, do something. Why not? But with that being said, solo travel has been blowing up, and I want to talk about it. I think it's something I honestly I have a lot of I had a lot of questions about, and I get a lot of questions about now. And I'm seeing a lot of my friends partake in it who I wouldn't even expect to have solo traveled. And so it's really interesting to just see this become so normalized. And something I've noticed a lot with people from, Europe or just really just not America, this is such more of a normalized thing versus, within America, we're so drilled into go to college, get a job right away, work and grind throughout your 20s, build up that savings account, like try to get a promotion, all of this shit. And it's all great and fine, but there's so much more to life. It's like we're rushing towards this thing that may or may not even exist. And I think looking around the world and connecting with other people is just the most enriching thing that we could be doing and just really aren't, especially in America. So I'll tell you a little bit about my journey with solo travel. I actually have always been really interested in being a quote digital nomad even before this was like a thing. I know, so cool of me, but I really have. It's been something I've always wanted to do. Like even in early college, I remember being like, by the time I hit 25, I'm want to transfer to a magazine in London so I can travel from there and it'll be way easier. Yada yada, all this stuff. I have just always had it really top of mind. I've never been somebody that really has associated a certain place with home. I've really always been a little bit more like free with what that means to me. So with that being said, it's something that's always been on my mind. But I was really always waiting on other people to do it. I had this vision in my head with, one of my serious boyfriends that I was like, oh, I can't wait till we like save up enough money and move to Europe and do this. And we were like in the midst of breaking up and he's like, I don't even want to do that. And I was like, okay, well, you could have said that. And I mean, waiting on friends to go do it. I was going to do it with one of my girlfriends, and then COVID happened, and then we obviously never did. And then all of a sudden now she's like engaged and has a house, and I freaking love that for her. But of course, she's not going to go leave for 6 months with me to go like bop around the world. Like, fair enough. But, just so many people, and not even with these big crazy vacations, or not, I don't even want to call them vacations, but not even with these big crazy travel plans, but even just a girls trip, it's like pulling teeth to try to plan a long weekend with your friends. It is craziness. So case in point, back to early 2022, I just had a lot shifting in my life at the time. I had just gotten out of a relationship that, I didn't, things were happening, but definitely I was a little jarred. And with that, I was really, I was spending a lot of time at his place. I was moving back into my place, really, and getting adjusted back there. I was also shifting my business at the time. So I was then like jumping into a new job. It was like so many shifts at the same time that gave me this realization that I was like, I kind of have this clean slate right now. Before I really sit and dive into rebuilding my life in New York, from a relationship perspective, a free time perspective, a career perspective, I have this slate in front of me. I better act before anything else happens. So that's exactly what I did. I booked a trip to Costa Rica 2 weeks in advance, really no planning. For whatever reason, I was like, Costa Rica, no clue why. Literally no idea why. Um, but something was just telling me Costa Rica. And I was like, okay. I ran it by, I was freelancing in-house at the time at a retailer. And it was so funny because I had started thinking about it that weekend. And then on Monday morning, our head of our department was like, hey, we are going back to office in, I want to say it was like 2 months from then, something like that, maybe a little later, but was like, we're going back to office. And I had just this light bulb moment of like, oh my God, okay, I have to go. Like, I have to go right now. This is my opportunity. And when I was fully freelance, I was so ingrained in my business, and it really was tough for me to tear myself away from that. So having, as funny as it is, having this like really wonderful role, I felt so much freer working at this company, although I was still freelance, but I was able to kind of, remove myself a little bit from it because it wasn't so personal as it being my business. So I felt comfortable getting ready to leave. And yeah, I know in the first episode, if you've listened to that, I talk a little bit about my first day there of getting to Costa Rica and what that looked like. But it definitely was jarring. Like, I'm not gonna lie to you. I had so much fun. The first second that I got into Costa Rica, I met the most incredible people who actually, two of them were hands down the closest ones that like my closest friends that I made throughout the entire trip, which was so funny. I had such a fun night going out, meeting cool people, going to the beach and seeing this beautiful sunset. And of course, still the next day was just a little like, holy shit, well, what did I just do? So I, on a whim, booked this trip to Costa Rica. I'm there. I have 3 months. I'm in a hostel. I've never been in a hostel before, like very not American things. And I mean, I'm a little bougier of a person, I guess you could say. But I'm like down for a good time, and I'm always down for an adventure. So, don't put it past me. Nonetheless, it was very out of my comfort zone, and I was really welcoming that challenge. And I think that's what the beautiful thing about solo travel is, and going to these different places. You're really learning this new sense of independence, and you're putting yourself in these situations that you just couldn't have possibly ever been in like New York City or your hometown, whatever that might be. And it was funny because I feel like I've always been a very, very independent person. I've started working from a young age. I started, I was an only child, and then I've always lived alone. I've ran my own business since I was 23. So I've always been very independent and very self-sufficient. But on the other hand, too, I've had very supportive parents. I've always been in a relationship. I have had these other things that I think brought me comfort that I didn't even realize. And, New York City is a tough city, don't get me wrong. But I've also been there for about 6 or 7 years, whatever it is. And, you start to get to know the lay of the land. And as independent and, putting yourself out there that you can be in those situations, you can't really get to that next level unless you really put yourself in a situation that you possibly couldn't be in. So I think that's what is so, so beautiful about solo travel. And God, so cheesy, but you learn so much about yourself. And I think it brings out this new sense of independence. And something I love seeing this, especially within the solo female travel realm, is really just bringing this confidence and independence to women. And it's very I think it's a different form of empowerment. And it's funny, now 2 of my good girlfriends have now also done solo trips. And it was kind of funny. Also, it was, semi after a breakup, kind of coming into this new era of yourself. And I think it's just so beautiful to watch them and watch, other women and having it just connecting with just so many people, whether it's people I've met or people in my personal life at home, seeing them take this opportunity to become such a strong and empowered woman and feel so great about yourself and putting yourself in these situations. With that being said, I think it's great for self-growth, but really what's so important is connecting with people. And you can take a vacation, and I think vacations and travel are very different, and nomading is very different. We can kind of run through the differences later. But I think you just don't get the same thing from taking a vacation. You can go visit Italy, you can go visit wherever. You can even go to Costa Rica and do it totally as a person, quote, on vacation. And I'm going to be honest, I don't think you get the same experience as if you're really traveling and getting ingrained in the culture, putting yourself out there, talking to locals, talking to people from other countries who are also traveling and doing similar things to you. And exploring in different ways, whether that be like taking local transportation and, just different things than you do if you're just kind of hanging at your resort or going to a 5-star, hotel and going to a Michelin restaurant and whatnot. So I think that those experiences are just so invaluable that you just can't put a price tag on some, getting ingrained in that way. So whether that be learning from other people in the sense of who you're connecting with, or it be the locals. And so what's funny is that is what totally kicked off this podcast, was hearing so many incredible stories on my solo travel journey. And so, like I mentioned in that first podcast episode, as a shopper, I love to go into businesses and talk to people, whether that be at restaurants when we're having a meal or going clothing shopping and hearing about their production process. And so many of my favorite things were sitting in the hostel and connecting with, other travelers who were also there by themselves or in groups or whatever it might be, and hearing their stories and their hardships, even of like, what sparked you to take a trip like this? How are you making this work? Is this normal for you? Are you putting yourself outside of your comfort zone? And then also seeing the commonalities. It is so, I think it's such a special thing to be making friends with people from around the world. And, you're sitting at a table with people from Europe, from Australia, from Asia, and you're all sitting and sometimes you're sharing those same struggles. And it's really interesting, and then everyone bringing their different perspectives to those conversations. There's just really nothing like it to, get an enlightened view on whatever you're working through. Learning from other people, I think, is just the best way to learn from yourself. And this solo travel journey really sets you up to be able to do that in different ways that we just truly don't get at home. And then putting it back to yourself, I think it's so interesting. Is it almost feels like you're in this other world where, people always say, I don't know if I should be saying this, but like when you do drugs, you can get like an ego death. And I think you get that a lot when you solo travel as well. So, this is kind of funny, but like I almost a lot of times don't feel like a real person when I'm just like walking around. Like I feel like just what do they call those? I don't know. There's some like Gen Z term for it. But I might feel just like a little character, like walking around in this like other world, just observing. And I think it's kind of cool, as it feels almost like you're really just throwing out the rule book of like, okay, well, this is what I do at home, so I'm supposed to do this here. Or I have to do X, Y, Z. Like, you don't have to do anything. And I think putting yourself in these situations, you start to realize that you're like, oh, this norm that I thought I had, like, really isn't such a thing. Or talking to somebody who was, grew up in a totally different culture than you did, and hearing their career trajectory or their values and relationships or whatever that might be. And it makes you question, if it's something different than what yours is, it really makes you question like, oh, I don't have to live by this exact playbook that's been drilled into my head, but there's so many different ways to approach life. Like, I'm going to throw the damn rule book out the window. Who needs it? I certainly don't want it. I feel like, what's the freaking fun in that? I don't think that's fun. And I think, it works for certain people if it's totally fine. But I think, how are you ever supposed to know that it does work for you unless you've gotten out of that headspace to understand these different options? So I just think it's so interesting. And I'm not going to lie to you, it can be really scary. So I guess I'll dive into my experience a little bit more. So I initially just booked a 3-week trip to Costa Rica. And oh my God, it certainly did not turn into that. I met just the most incredible people while I was traveling, and it brought even more experiences that I kept extending my trip, going on weekenders. I ended up in Nicaragua with this girl that I met on the first day, and we became a best freaking friends and had just a ball meeting different people, going on adventures together. And I mean, oh my God, we got into some crazy situations from renting a car in Costa Rica and trying to cross the border into Nicaragua, which you certainly cannot do, and ending up on this, trying to get to a full moon rave that ending up, what didn't even happen, but I mean, we did end up at a rave, but, it was kind of different. It was supposed to be on top of a volcano. This was on a beach, different vibes, but nonetheless. But where was I even going with that? Oh. Okay, yeah. So we ended up on a volcano island with $20. They don't have an ATM. We're at a vegan hostel. We're not vegan. We're freaking starving. We have $20. We're meeting all these people, doing all these crazy things. But it's funny because it sounds like, oh, so silly. You're out there partying. But yes, but also no. I met so many people, also learned crazy life skills of, how do I keep us safe while our plan is totally derailing? How do I communicate with somebody who comes from a different background than I do? How can I have fun but also still get home? How can I make $20 last? So many different things. I just think it's so interesting. So anyway, then I went on this road trip to Nicaragua. I ended up traveling to different cities within Costa Rica and really, really enjoyed my time doing that and getting out into nature. I mean, I am such a New York City girly, and now nature is such an integral part of what I feel like I need to be sane that I'm moving to Brooklyn because I can't stand to be in downtown Manhattan anymore. That was a big thing that I learned about myself doing that. I ended up meeting a guy who invited me to Guatemala, and I ended up in Guatemala. I didn't even have Guatemala on my radar, and honestly, it's my absolute favorite country, and now that I've ever been to, and I just had the best freaking time exploring that, whether while I was with him, but also solo, and which part of my favorite part of that trip. Incredible, and I ended up being gone for 2 months. So you just never know where these experiences take you. And it then led me to then spend some time even in LA. So I wasn't quite ready to do another big, trip to somewhere totally different, but I wanted, some sort of change up and to learn, still explore different sides of myself. And even going from New York, then I went to LA, was supposed to be there for a month, ended up being there for nearly 3 months. And I loved it. I took so much away even from spending time there and learning about slowing down and paying more attention to my health and wellness, and also really focusing on friendships and building out these really just incredible friendships and how their dynamics are so much different than ours in New York, and really, put a lot of value back on that for me. And also the importance of having a home in New York. I have my little apartment that I look at as a crash pad, and I stayed in this beautiful home in LA. One was a guest house in the hills, and another was a 1-bedroom that I was renting in West Hollywood. And it felt so incredible to have a home. And like I mentioned earlier, I've never been a big home person, and that really changed that for me. So now I'm really investing more. I'm moving next month and investing more in a home. So, or not literally, I'm not buying a home in my apartment. I'm getting a nicer apartment and spending more money on it. Whatever, you get what I'm saying. And right now, as I'm recording this, I am in Bali. And oh my God, if you know me, I'm sickeningly obsessed with Eat, Pray, Love. I don't know why. I have always been since I was in middle school. I really don't know why it resonated so much with me as a middle schooler, but it did. And it's my chronic comfort movie. I watch it probably once a month. I'm also one of those psychopaths who just re-watches the same shit over and over again. I've seen Gossip Girl 9 times through. I will admit that. And I have no shame. Maybe a little bit of shame, but not that much. Nonetheless, I started to have this realization again. I felt like I kind of had, I set up this clean slate for myself. And I, saw my life starting to shift again and had these new values like wanting to have a home and wanting to, just do more things for myself. And I set 3 goals. I said I wanted to really start this podcast, dive in. I wanted to solo travel once more, and I wanted to get a new home before I really dive into whatever the next chapter of my life is. But I don't want to say settling down, but maybe being in New York for a second and putting a little more thought into, what my life looks like there. Nonetheless, was like, not thinking small, but I was like, oh yeah, I'll go to Costa Rica or I'll go, wherever. But the top of my bucket list has always been Bali, and was like, why the hell not? Why don't you just do it? And I think it's funny because there's always a way to make things happen. Whatever that might be, there is always a way. And for me, that's like subletting my apartment. That's how I'm doing this. It pays for my travel by doing that because, as we know, New York rent is hella expensive, and it can buy you rent in Bali plus a really expensive plane ticket. So nonetheless, that is how I ended up here in Bali. And just, I think there's so many things too that this has really taught me of living for yourself and treating yourself is so important, and taking care of yourself in different ways, and knowing what your love language is. And definitely this is one of mine. So nonetheless, whether you are a true vacationer, that's amazing. Get out there, do your thing. If you are a true backpacker and, staying in the $12 a night dorm hostels, like doing that, love that for you. Actually living out of a backpack, I simply cannot do that, but like love that for you. Or you're, a bit more nomadic and are still working full time, traveling a little bit slower, or, just this term is so cliche, but I keep seeing it pop up in these like travel trend reports of like being a quote, a glam packer. Do your thing and get out there in whatever way makes you comfortable and what you find valuable. And I think there's so many different ways, to do that. And as everybody is different and everyone's journey is different and the lessons that you'll learn are different, that setup is going to look different for you. Oh my God, how many times did I just say different? But case in point, you get what I'm saying. Anyway, okay, so as we know, I'm a New York City fashion girly. I like the finer things in life. So I'm going to run you through a few of my tips on how to be an elevated traveler, a glam packer per se, even though I really freaking hate that term. It is so cringe, but it encompasses it. Anyway, okay, so for me, I really enjoy hostels in the sense of the social aspect. That's where I've met all of my friends truly when I've been traveling, is through a hostel. But for me, working, I either then need to buy a workspace or I can only do it for a certain amount of time. I also am someone that really values my alone time. First and foremost, do your research on the hostel. There's party hostels. There's some that are for like an older demographic, but like the people in my hostel that I'm staying in now, everybody is about like 25 to like 40. So it's not like you're like sitting there with a bunch of, 22-year-old, not 20, whatever. There's people who can be like-minded. So first and foremost, make sure you're not staying in a party hostel, if that's not your vibe. But also get the private room, like just freaking do it. I'm in this gorgeous hostel here now. My private room is very, very affordable, and it's almost like a studio apartment. It's absolutely crazy, but you kind of get the best of both worlds. So that's a pro tip that I think has been super helpful for me. Something that brings me sanity is traveling a little bit slower. Some people book 2 nights at a time. Totally, that makes sense if that works for you. I've definitely made the mistake of overbooking in a certain place and staying a bit too long. I have always done my research and have liked the places I've been staying, so it's been okay. But for wanting to jump on, like, for example, like a group is going on, getting a villa for a weekend and you want to go, I'll end up double paying, which sucks, but that's kind of the downfall of booking too far in advance. But with that being said, I do think it sets you up to have a routine. And I think that's what's really important if you are wanting to do long-term travel or solo travel. I think you do kind of need to bring in some sense of normalcy to just give you a bit of a peace of mind. So like I mentioned that first episode, or that be my like Sunday coffee walks, that's super important to me. having a gym to go to or a workout space, something like that. That's another really great one. Or it could be even a workspace. But I think investing, this is kind of a two-part, but I think developing a routine and then also investing in amenities that you know are important to you. Like I mentioned, like a gym is really important to me, especially if I am like with a lot of people all the time, and then having a space that I can just like feel like I'm alone or, doing something for myself. That's super important. I think that's a great travel hack. Don't fear the backpack. You can make it work. I know there's a bunch of hacks, but also like don't feel like you need to have a literal backpack to be a quote backpacker. I go around with my carry-on suitcase. I know other girlies too. It's totally fine. Will it be inconvenient sometimes? Yes. Like for example, I was going from Santa Teresa to my flight at the airport, and did I know that there was a ferry portion of the trip? No. So I'm sitting in the shuttle like so damn hungover, and I'm thinking like, okay, fine, whatever. I like can barely close my suitcase. I'll sit here. I'll take a little nap in this shuttle. I'll be there before I know it. No, absolutely not. They're like, okay, get out here, and I'm like, where the hell are we? We get dropped off at this port. Go on a ferry. It is so damn hot. The ferry's packed. I luckily found a seat and it was fine. But oh my God, I'm trying to pull my freaking carry-on suitcase up the stairs of this ferry. People are looking at me like I'm a crazy person. And then get into another shuttle. Luckily, they were able to fit my luggage in because it barely did. And then get to the hostel and it was all fine. So does it make your life more difficult sometimes? Yes. But if having your skincare routine and, a nice set of outfits is important to you, then by all means, just do it. Just bring it. My other thing is buy the cancellation policy. Just buy it. It is so worth the extra $20, whether that be like for your, on bookings, if you booked a hostel, whatever that might be, your Airbnb or your flight, like, did I know that I was going to end up in Guatemala with a man from London? No. Am I glad I did? Yeah, I'm glad I bought the cancellation policy because it was a hell of a good time. So just set yourself up, I think, to have the best time possible, and you will learn so much about yourself. I think it's always going to be scary. It absolutely is not an easy thing to be like, hey, I'm going to fly myself around the world and see what happens and just go for it. But I don't know if I've ever heard of anyone who's regretted a situation. Even I've gotten sick on every trip, like dead ass. I've been sick for freaking days, but it's still so worth it. Everything is always worth it. And just the lessons are so, so good. And you get a lot of great stories from it, let me tell you. People think I am way more interesting than I am at this point because I can sit here and spew out some silly, silly stories. Nonetheless, I am such a purveyor for solo travel. If you ever have any questions about it, I'm really happy to chat. I'm definitely not an expert. This has been a new thing for me within the past, year or so. But we're all on a journey. Figure it out. We're all figuring it out. Anyway, thanks for tuning in.